This video is on calculation, so it's your more normal plus, minus, times, and division on approximated numbers, or shall I just say calculations with upper bounds and lower bounds. I think it makes it easier. Okay, if we look at the first explanation here, this is in your textbooks, people, where they say for addition, they ask you what is the upper and the lower bounds of the sum, importantly, plus, of the measurement 6 centimeters and 2 centimeters, each correct to the nearest centimeter. In the previous video, people, I have shown you how to find the place value to which a number was rounded to. Okay, so in this case, if you look at this, it's to the nearest centimeter, meaning I taught you to underline the place value that it was rounded to. Then you put a 1 underneath and a 1 underneath. All other digits that would be involved if it was greater numbers would become zeros. And then you simply read off that value. This value is a 1. Okay? So in step 1, firstly, we must calculate the limit. So you take the place value that it was rounded to, you divide that by 2, and then you basically get 0.5 in this case, which gives you the limit of what it could be, the upper and the lower bound. Okay. Then we calculate the upper bound by adding the limit to the 6, so it gives me 6.5, and the lower bound by subtracting from 6, which gives me 5.5. And then the same you do to the value, the other number, which was given as 2. All right. Now, importantly, for the sum, okay, it would mean 6 plus 2 equals 8. But to find the upper bound for the sum, you will add both upper bounds. Okay? You will add upper bound and upper bound, which in this case gives me the 9. Okay? Then I would not even look at these two, people, because you never use those. Then the sum for the lower bound, you would add the lower bound to the lower bound, which in this case gives you a 7, which gives you the smallest possible number. So if we look at how we calculate the upper bound and the lower bound for a sum, then the lower bound is lower bound plus lower bound, and the upper bound is upper bound plus upper bound. So this is the most important part for you to remember. Okay? For a sum, it's lower bound lower plus lower bound, and upper bound plus upper bound. I will then now jump to multiplication. Okay, the question is now to find the product of the measurement 6 and 2. So the numbers are the same. Okay, they were rounded to the nearest centimeter. So to find your limit, you divide the 1, which is 1 unit, by 2, which gives you 0.5. Okay, so once again, in step 1, find your upper and your lower bound for both of these numbers. Okay, that is what we done in the previous video. If you don't know how to do that, please watch the previous video. Now, if we look at the product, which is multiplication, to find the upper bound of the product, the biggest possible, you multiply upper bound by upper bound, okay, which in this case gives you 16.25. And to get the smallest possible value, you multiply the lower bound by the lower bound, which gives you 8.25 in this case. And then you can write your inequality, okay? The product is greater than or equal to 8.25 and less than, remember there's no equal here, to 16.25. But importantly, you can remember that for the product, you also multiply lower bound times lower bound and upper bound times upper bound. So multiplication and addition, people, addition and multiplication is done in exactly the same way. Then if we go and look at subtractions, it is still the same question. Now you must find the difference between the two numbers, upper bounds and lower bounds of 6 and 2, rounded to the nearest centimeter. So again, step 1, where you find your upper bound and lower bound, is exactly the same. Okay, now importantly, when we look at the difference, okay, to find the biggest possible difference, you take your upper bound and you subtract your lower bound. People, the biggest possible difference is found by the greatest possible number minus the smallest possible number. That gives you the biggest difference, okay? UB minus LB, which in this case gives you 5. But if you want to find the smallest difference, then you subtract the lower bound minus the upper bound, which in this case gives you 3. So if we once again look at our inequality, then the difference is greater than or equal to 3 and less than 5. How did we find that? For the smallest, you subtract lower bound minus upper bound. And for the greatest difference, it is upper bound minus lower bound. Okay? Important here, people. You must just remember that. So for the greatest possible difference, it's upper bound minus lower bound. For the smallest difference, it's lower bound minus upper bound. Okay, and then when we look at the last possible operation, which is the division, so now you must find the quotient, okay, the division, the quotient of the 6 and 2. Remember again, step 1 is the same. You find the lower bound and upper bound for both. Now, to find the greatest quotient, okay, you will subtract the UB, the UB divided by the LB. So in this case, it gives you an answer of 4.33. And then to find the smallest quotient, people, it is again the lower bound divided by the upper bound. So it is the highest possible number divided by the smallest possible number. And then the two middle values, okay? The lower bound divided by the upper bound, which in this case gives you 2.2. So once again, let's look at the inequality. The quotient is greater than or equal to 2.2, which you found by dividing lower bound divided by upper bound, okay? And then it is less than 4.33, which is found by upper bound divided by lower bound. So I want you to just focus on these 4 that I have circled. For addition and for multiplication, you multiply and add the 2 lower bounds, and you multiply and you add the 2 upper bounds, okay? So multiplication and addition, it's LB plus LB and UB plus UB. This you must just simply learn and remember. Okay, then for the difference and for the quotient, okay, for the biggest difference, it is UB minus LB. For the smallest one, it's LB minus UB. If you think about it logically, it makes sense, people. So for the lower bound of the difference, it's LB minus UB. The lower bound of the smallest number minus the upper bound. And then for the biggest difference, it is the upper bound minus the lower bound. Okay, and then the same counts for the quotient. For the quotient, to find the lower bound of a quotient, it is LB divided by UB. And to find the biggest quotient, it is UB divided by LB. All right, once again, people, these 4 things, okay, you must just simply learn and remember. I suggest to stop the video now and to actually copy that somewhere from which you can actually learn this. Do the addition and multiplication in the same color, because it is the same thing, and then do the difference and the quotient in the same color because those two are again the same.